We are knee-deep in biopics about the entertainment industry. We have been for a while now, and it's not going to stop anytime soon. Sometimes actors win major awards for these performances, for their uncanny transformations into recognizable figures. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes things go wrong. One such performance you might remember is Lindsay Lohan's turn as Elizabeth Taylor in the 2012 Lifetime original movie Liz and Dick, which chronicles the tumultuous, ultra-passionate love affair between Taylor and fellow actor Richard Burton, from their first meeting on the set of Cleopatra through Burton's death in 1984. However, Liz and Dick, unlike many other examples of commonly derided biopics, was never seen as or sold as prestige awards bait. No one saw the announcement Lindsay Lohan to play Elizabeth Taylor in Lifetime movie and said, well, this year's Oscar race just got interesting. Instead, this film was marketed as a meta-commentary on and potential rebound for the career of Lindsay Lohan, who'd spent years under fire for her off-screen behavior. So in this video, we're going to revisit Liz and Dick, why it was made, what it promised to do for Lohan, how it reframes Elizabeth Taylor, and how it holds up to scrutiny. Sometime around Elizabeth Taylor's passing in March of 2011, producer Larry A. Thompson conceived of making a film about her relationship with Richard Burton. Made-for-TV biopics about famous couples were kind of Thompson's bread and butter. He produced films about Lucille Ball and Desi Arnaz, Sonny and Cher, and the Duke and Duchess of Windsor. Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton seemed like a no-brainer, two of the most beautiful, talented, and famous individuals of the 20th century who find themselves in a whirlwind love triangle, who marry and divorce twice, and whose illicit romance created such a scandal that even the Pope denounced them. The movie sells itself. Taylor's death had renewed interest in her story, and the film would have a natural landing pad at Lifetime, which had struck gold with a series of biopics like Life is Not a Fairy Tale, the story of American Idol winner Fantasia Barrino, and a Coco Chanel biopic starring Shirley MacLaine. Of course, Thompson got the green light, and the question became, who could possibly play a generational icon like Elizabeth Taylor? He approached Megan Fox, Olivia Wilde, Kate Beckinsale, and Jennifer Connelly, but none of them worked out. Instead, the role went to
Lindsay Lohan has scored the unlikely role of Elizabeth Taylor in the new TV biopic Liz and Dick for Lifetime Network, as long as she completes all her probation requirements.
Ready to be a big famous celebrity?
Oh, I guess. I don't really think of it that way. I just think of myself as like a normal kid, so.
America got to know 12-year-old Lindsay Lohan in Nancy Meyers' 1998 remake of The Parent Trap. As little girls across the country debated whether they wanted to be a Hallie or an Annie, memorized the handshake, and dreamed of having some grand adventure at summer camp, Lohan was well on her way to becoming the next big child star. Her follow-up performances in Life Size, Confessions of a Teenage Drama Queen, Freaky Friday, and of course, Mean Girls, solidified her place as a bankable, talented teen icon. She acted alongside Jane Fonda and Meryl Streep, and under the direction of Robert Altman and Paul Schrader, signaling that she could potentially evolve into a prestige actress and lead the next generation of young actors, sort of in the vein of fellow Freaky Friday actress Jodie Foster. The excesses of fame quickly took its toll, however, and Lohan's troubled personal life quickly began to eclipse her career. From 2007 through the spring of 2012, she attended 5 rehab facilities, appeared in court 20 times, where she was found to have violated her probation 4 times, and was sentenced to 6 months in jail. She spent less than 2 weeks behind bars collectively, however. Measures to relieve jail overcrowding led to her release after just hours in all but one of those visits. Lohan had to do 480 hours of community service at the LA Downtown Women's Center and the county morgue. And finally, this will come up later, in February 2011, she was charged with felony grand theft for allegedly stealing a $2,500 necklace from a jewelry store in Los Angeles. I'm trying my best here to detail how extensive Lohan's run-ins with the law were without sounding like I'm harvesting her drama, but the point I basically want to make is that by 2012, this is who Lindsay Lohan was to most people. In society's collective imagination, she had gone from a promising young actress to a cautionary tale and the butt of the joke. Stalking Lohan and documenting any public misstep became a sport for the media, who couldn't have cared less about her struggles with addiction and her mental health.
Yes, it's the never-ending adventures of Lindsay Lohan.
Uh-oh, here we go. Hello, gorgeous. Lindsay, how you doing, gorgeous?
With all of this in mind, perhaps it's no surprise that the news that Lindsay Lohan would play Elizabeth Taylor in a biopic landed with a loud A little pushback is always expected when casting biopics. Fans always have ideas about who should play who, and Taylor would be no different, with her recent passing raising the stakes on getting it right. And upon first glance, Lohan didn't seem to check many boxes an actor would need to check to play Taylor. Presumably, the film would include snippets of Taylor's films. How would Lohan, who worked in mostly comedy, replicate Taylor's work in, for example, Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf? Lohan would have to play Taylor throughout multiple decades. How would an actress known primarily for playing children and teenagers fare as a 50-year-old woman? These are genuine fair concerns, in my opinion, and we'll see later on in the video that they were prescient. But by far, the thing that raised the greatest skepticism among audiences was Lohan's reputation. Articles announcing her casting often employed a sneering tone. She had spent more time in jail and in court than on a set in the past few years. At least Liz and Dick would be another entry on her acting resume and not on her rap sheet. Taylor had spent decades earning the respect of the entertainment industry, so to cast someone so clearly disrespected by the industry, the law, and I guess America generally, felt like an insult to her memory to many fans.
Her probation is over in March, and then it's time to get going. But will she be able to pull off a version of one of Hollywood's classiest women of all time?
Still, while Taylor ultimately became a cherished icon, there were certainly moments in her career where she too was targeted for her personal behavior. William J. Mann, author of How to Be a Movie Star, Elizabeth Taylor in Hollywood, wrote a defense of Lindsay Lohan's casting in the Huffington Post, pointing out that what was often forgotten in all the exaltation was that Elizabeth wasn't always so beloved. Once upon a time, she was denounced by columnists and church groups for breaking up happy marriages, for showing too much skin, for using profanity, for making dirty movies. Old-time celebs like Joan Crawford lamented that the Elizabeth Taylors of the new generation were making a mockery of stardom. Perhaps this point of connection between Taylor and Lohan would be the key to making the whole film click. That's what Thompson wanted everyone to believe anyway. He told Out magazine, Lindsay Lohan could relate to Elizabeth Taylor, and we felt that with the combination of her acting talent, with her personal experiences similar to Elizabeth Taylor, she could bring a level of maturity and understanding to the role that maybe others might not. Both had been highly successful child actors, both had highly scrutinized romantic relationships, both had a fraught relationship with the press, to put it lightly. In fact, Taylor experienced the genesis of the modern tabloid press, as the film tells us in one of its many excellent moments of reading Wikipedia out loud.
And they call them paparazzi. Paparazzi. It means little buzzing insects. I think Fellini actually coined the word.
If anyone could understand the pitfalls of celebrity Taylor endured, Lindsay could.
Lindsay, are you excited about playing Elizabeth Taylor? Been watching Elizabeth Taylor movies?
Why do you have to get so close?
Okay, I could see how that idea could be really interesting. But are we really buying that, though? Are we really buying that Thompson ignored every indicator that casting Lindsay Lohan made no sense and cast her anyway in order to make a piercing critique on the intrusion of the press in actors' lives and examine the difficulties child actors experience as they age via some meta connection between these two actresses? Do we think he cast Lindsay Lohan in his Lifetime original movie to achieve all of that, or do we think he cast her as a gimmick to draw attention to his project? The marketing of the film certainly suggested it was the latter. Hermione Hobie wrote in The Guardian, "The fascination surrounding Liz and Dick has little to do with any hope of a great performance. This, it seems, is the first movie to be explicitly marketed around the disastrous life of its own star, making it an indictment of contemporary celebrity as funny as it is upsetting." Promotional teasers connected inflammatory words like provocative and controversial with Lohan.
She's young. young, and she got a bad rap. You know,
Lindsay Lohan, she's 25 years old, attempting a comeback.
She's got this new role. Lindsay's playing Elizabeth Taylor in a Lifetime movie.
Hobie wasn't alone in her skepticism. The grift wasn't lost on any member of the press. Richard Lawson wrote in The Atlantic, "We all know why Lohan was cast, which adds an extra depressing dimension to the film. She's here as a stunt. There's no way any actual director thought, yes, Lindsay Lohan, that's the ticket, she simply must play this part." Maureen Ryan wrote for the Huffington Post, "Exploitation really is the name of the game here. The whole point of casting Lohan was to draft off her status as a formerly promising actress who some time ago became tabloid fodder thanks to her career-destroying antics." Sheila Maricar bluntly observed for ABC News, "Let's be real. You're not going to watch Liz and Dick because you want to know about the love story of Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton. If you tune into this mess of a movie, it will be because you want to see how bad Lindsay Lohan is in her supposed comeback." Thompson really became the mouthpiece for this production, with major profiles in the New York Times and LA Times that painted an enticing portrait for the media. He praised Lohan by saying things like, "I don't think I could have found a better actress to have played Elizabeth Taylor at this time." But he also made sure to slip in cutting remarks like, "Making a movie with Lindsay Lohan is not for the faint of heart." To The Hollywood Reporter, he described the incarceration insurance they purchased for Lohan, how they worried about her not meeting the requirements of her probation, how she had certain behavior patterns that made the production problematic. He told CNN, "Making a movie with Lindsay Lohan is like jumping out of an airplane at 10,000 feet with a bolt of white nylon, a string, and a sewing machine. You're building a parachute as fast as you can." There's a difference between being honest about what might have been a difficult shoot and piling onto the substantial negative attention Lohan was already receiving. Thompson's willingness to publicly emphasize her alleged difficulties only seemed to confirm what everyone already knew. He wanted to use Lohan's reputation as bait. The more people believed Lindsay Lohan was an unhinged mess, the more they would assume her performance would be an unhinged mess, the more likely they'd be to tune in to see it for themselves. It's the cruel but distressingly savvy move of a good producer and a shitty person. The old adage that any press is good press, he said, "I'm praying that that adage remains true." Thompson's interviews carried such weight because he essentially filled a vacuum vacated by Lohan, who understandably had opted out of in-depth interviews for most of the year and instead participated primarily in shorter, more predictable contexts like morning shows. Yet somehow, even in those appearances, controversy seemed to follow her, like the time Good Morning America accidentally revealed to her that she had a secret half-sister in the middle of the interview.
I know just today there was news that you allegedly have a new half-sister. How do you handle your family being so...
I didn't even hear that, so thanks for the news. I don't pay attention to any of it.
I mean...
Barbara Walters had arranged an exclusive with Lohan and even visited her on the set of Liz and Dick. But before they could film the sit-down portion of the interview, Lohan changed publicity teams and subsequently declined to continue with Walters. Walters discussed the situation on The View, expressing frustration that Lohan had instead chosen to appear on The Tonight Show with Jay Leno.
I spent a lot of time doing a lot of homework, writing a lot of questions.
Binders full of one woman.
Why is it canceled? Lindsay doesn't feel up to it. Well, I mean, she has a lot of problems, and it was just one more, and I said, you know, poor girl, I hope when she feels like it, she will do it with us. So today I pick up the punchline. The punchline. Lindsay Lohan is sitting for an interview with Jay Leno.
Uh-oh. Shockingly, Whoopi made an actual good point. We know what Barbara Walters is like, and it would make sense for a young woman under constant media scrutiny to want to participate in a relatively less intense interview. I couldn't find a full video of the Leno interview, but reporting indicates that Lohan got the easier interview she was looking for. Leno lobbed some softballs at her about Liz and Dick before pivoting to a bit about fake tabloid covers and asking her about a Jell-O commercial she made as a kid.
Kids go ape for new Jell-O grapes.
gobble it up with a purple slurp.
Actors who do press for a biopic typically receive questions about their transformations. And yet, after all the research I did, I still have no clue how Lohan prepared, her approach to finding Elizabeth, nothing. In the few interviews she consented to do, no one asked her those questions. Everything was about her personal life. Lohan never commented on anything Thompson said about her, because of course he can be shady, but she can't, and spoke straightforwardly about why she wanted the role and how she had actively pursued it because she was a big fan of Taylor's. Taylor had even gifted Lohan one of her necklaces, and because she thought landing a challenging role would help her turn a new leaf.
I want public knowledge to be about my work, not about things that I didn't get into this business for, that I've put myself in positions where, that was the bigger story than what I was working on. I had seen that they were going to be making the movie, and I got the producer's number and started harassing Larry Thompson. I didn't even care if my agents were going to do it or not. I just did it myself too, because I was like, no one else is going to play this role. I have to do this. So I'm really honored, and I will not let anyone down, especially myself. So.
It's funny that you felt the need to say that. I will not let anyone down.
Because people, I could see where it could be scary for people to invest in me, and I don't want people to have that reason to be scared anymore. So being able to have this opportunity with SNL and the film, I'm going to do what I'm supposed to do. I've learned to love myself, and I think that's really important, and I've learned to take the time that I need to do what I need to do that's going to make me happy. I really want to focus on my work right now. I really do. And that's the first time, I think, ever in my life that I've said that. So that's a big deal for me.
Unfortunately, nothing that happened after the initial casting announcement undermined the media's cynical instincts. Stories quickly began to leak of chaos on the set. In June, Lohan had a car accident on the way to the set. No one was injured, though she was sent to the hospital as a precaution. Later that month, producers summoned medics to treat Lohan for exhaustion after an all-night shoot. After these reports, IATSE, the union that represents most crew members in movies and TV, began monitoring the hours and working conditions on the shoot. Needless to say, all of this was meticulously reported on. So I think we've got a troubling situation here. We have an actress who, out of a genuine desire to redefine herself and set a course for a more positive future, pursued a role she unfortunately probably wasn't ready to take on, both due to a lack of experience and a still very much unsteady personal life. We also have a producer willing to take advantage of her sincere efforts and exploit her damaged reputation. A press that seemingly ached for her downfall rather than her rehabilitation, and a culture where anyone could giddily log into Twitter to craft the perfect zinger at her expense. And look, I can't be on a high horse here. I'm almost positive that if I'd had Twitter in 2012, I would have almost certainly been doing the exact same thing. But it does feel icky, doesn't it? Just a horribly unfortunate situation from almost every angle. And the actual movie made the whole thing worse. I wish I could come here and say that, in hindsight, critics clearly missed all the positive things Liz and Dick had to offer. But unfortunately, even wearing my most generous critical goggles, I cannot resuscitate the reputation of this film. It is as bad as people feared, or maybe hoped, it would be. New Yorker television critic Emily Nussbaum tweeted while watching Liz and Dick, "Somewhere there is a pie chart of who's at fault for the badness of this movie. Lohan's only 10%. 10% is low. But I agree that there are fundamental problems here that no performance could possibly overcome. First of all, take the film's strange framing device, in which Elizabeth and Richard are sitting together in a kind of black box theatrical abyss, narrating their perspectives, which of course doesn't make any fucking sense after Richard dies.
And without him, I didn't know what to do.
Are they both dead? Who knows? Second, the costuming replicates Taylor's wardrobe well, but there was almost no effort made to age Lohan at any point in the film, which at best torpedoes her believability and at worst devolves into comedy.
It's like you have breasts and turned 40 in this business and it's bye-bye.
Third, and look, I know this is a Lifetime film and probably didn't have a huge budget, but wow, it does not look good. Reviews would later call out its cheap production design, suggesting to me that even by 2012 green screen standards, Liz and Dick missed the mark. Worst of all, it's amazing the degree to which this film almost goes out of its way to make these events less interesting than they actually were. The story begins on Burton's first day on the set of the 1963 film Cleopatra. If you know nothing about the history of this film, you'd assume Taylor and Burton showed up for a run-of-the-mill production and that this marriage was a totally normal one. In reality, this film and that marriage are possibly the two most chaotic contexts in Hollywood history in which to begin an affair. By the time we reach this point in the story, Cleopatra had already been filming for over a year, the production had gone through 2 directors, several scripts, been recast, relocated from London to Rome, and Elizabeth Taylor almost died twice, first of meningitis, then of pneumonia. They had about 10 minutes of usable footage, and the film had already gone so far over budget that it very nearly destroyed 20th Century Fox. Joe Mankiewicz, who ultimately directed the film, later said it was the toughest 3 pictures I ever made, that it was conceived in a state of emergency, shot in confusion, and wound up in a blind panic. Where is all of that stress and discord here? Where's the inner turmoil Elizabeth was experiencing? Is she written to be the woman whose husband just died in a plane crash, then created an enormous scandal by breaking up her best friend's marriage? Or is she written to be this simplistic, lovesick diva? There's just no meat on the bones here, even though the reality of this story is a juicy-ass slice of Wagyu steak. I've barely grazed over how truly disastrous the production of Cleopatra was, by the way, but if you're interested in learning more, be sure to tune into TCM's podcast, The Plot Thickens, this July, because this season will detail the whole ordeal. I've also linked to a Variety article below that outlines everything too. Most of the drama in Liz and Dick is instead the push and pull melodramatics of extramarital affairs. Spouses are angry, they try their best to stay away from each other, but they just can't because fate demands it. And yet there's barely any tension there either. There are so many scenes like this where they just sort of look at each other and say something like,
"Have I lost you?"
You haven't lost me. I've lost you.
These scenes don't really have an emotional impact because they just exist unattached to anything. Take this sequence, for example. They visit each other for the first time after Cleopatra. Taylor's mother asks,
"So, tell me, are you going to see him again?" "Maybe."
But then the next scene is them hanging out, and the scene after that is them exchanging gifts. Like, what happened? How did we get here? What's going on? The problem is that these are not regular people, and this was not a regular affair, even in the context of Hollywood. You must remember this goat, Karina Longworth, reviewed the film for Slate and pointed out that the real Burton and Taylor weren't real people. They lived like something between gods and space aliens, as though the rules that govern mere mortals simply did not apply to them. What should feel like an opera, a queen and her king at the top of the world, who rise from scandal to powerhouse duo, who are then swept aside by the arrival of new Hollywood and reemerge as the gimmick version of themselves, feels small and safe. As portrayed in Liz and Dick, nicknames they hated by the way, the couple isn't nearly drunk enough, horny enough, haunted, jubilant, or witty enough to evoke the real thing. As for the actors, I have not yet mentioned Grant Bowler, who plays Richard Burton. He is absolutely serviceable, exactly what you'd look for in the TV version of Richard Burton. I cannot safely say, however, that Lindsay Lohan achieves even the TV version of Elizabeth Taylor. There's such a modern tenor to her performance that plucks it out of time in jarring ways. Still, Lohan delivers her most convincing line reads in that tenor. She seems much less comfortable with mid-century speech patterns and phrasing, and they have her say "I'll be damned" a lot. Ultimately, I think the performance proves an obvious truth, that Elizabeth Taylor was a much stronger actor than Lindsay Lohan. And to put Lohan in Taylor's literal shoes, only serves to emphasize the cavernous gap between their talents. It does no favors to an actress who had some rust to shake off and who'd never played a remotely similar role before. I struggled perceiving Lohan as a middle-aged woman. Obviously, a lot of that has to do with the makeup issue I described earlier, but I suspect her lack of experience affected the performance too. Lohan had dipped her toe into playing explicitly adult characters in I Know Who Killed Me and Labor Pains on ABC Family, but for the most part, Lohan had not been challenged with embodying a mature adult character. And understandably, because she was in her early 20s, and you can play a student until you're 30 these days, apparently. Her performance as Taylor lacks the lived-in quality that natural maturity would offer. She hits every line directly and obviously, turning fights into tantrums and depression into something closer to teenage sulking.
I won't live without you.
As Willa Paskin wrote in her review on Salon, child actors can get away with a cutesy directness, a workmanlike stagey quality that comes across as phony in adult actors. In child actors, effort can make up for a lack of believability. Trying hard counts when you're a kid, but Lohan has never been able to quite erase this fakery from her adult performances, which results in moments like, famously,
I'm bored! I'm so bored!
While watching this performance, stick with me here, I was actually reminded of the research I did about Patty Duke for my Valley of the Dolls videos. If we're looking for a historical counterpart to Lindsay Lohan, I'd argue that Duke fits the bill much more than Taylor does. After Duke won the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actress at just 15 years old for her performance in The Miracle Worker, she became a teenage icon in the vein of a modern Disney star. She had her own TV show in which she portrayed identical cousins and began a modest foray into pop music. All the while, Duke struggled immensely with her undiagnosed bipolar disorder, substance abuse, and an abusive situation at home that eventually began to affect her on-screen work. After her show ended, amidst all of this personal turbulence, she too sought a role that she believes would help her graduate into more adult work. But like Lohan, she was not prepared professionally or personally, and the performance, well, let's say predictably didn't do for her what she thought it would. It took years for Duke to recover, as it would for Lohan. Their experiences as teen icons highlight a key difference between Lohan and Taylor that speaks to how the industry and culture changed in the years between their respective peaks. Taylor was never a teen icon exactly. She came of age before the concept of the teenager really became mainstream. As she matured, you can literally see the press grasping for words to try to describe her. Like Luella Parsons wrote in Photoplay in 1950, Elizabeth, I think, confuses all of us because she is currently a strange blend of girl and woman. Once Taylor began to look like an adult, as she would quite young, MGM began to treat her like an adult, tutoring her in how she should walk, talk, look, and most importantly, how to manipulate the press. Taylor leapfrogged that awkward in-between phase of a child actor's career practically overnight. At 16, she played the wife of Robert Taylor in Conspirator, who at the time was 38. All child stars are forced to some degree to age too quickly, but MGM really forced Elizabeth Taylor to speed run to adulthood, whether she was prepared to do so or not. By Lohan's age at the time of filming Liz and Dick, Taylor had been married 3 times, divorced twice, and had 3 children. In other words, they may have both been child stars, but they had vastly different experiences of youth. Still, the film worked its hardest to find moments in Taylor's life that those in the know could conceivably read as a reference to Lohan's. The paparazzi, of course, immediately brings to mind familiar images. We see her trying on a necklace in a jewelry store, which quite a few critics pointed out as a reference to Lohan's arrest for theft. There's even a moment in which Liz insists upon starring in the VIPs, knowing her name will attract enough publicity to justify her casting, a situation that certainly sounds familiar.
You pay me and fire all of your PR people because, buddy, you won't need them.
Ironically, this kind of meta storytelling is very much up Elizabeth Taylor's alley. She won her first Oscar for Butterfield 8, a film remembered for little else but its unsubtle references to her affair with Eddie Fisher.
One for all and all for one.
The question is, which one?
More on that story here. And after all, what could be more meta than the continual pairing of Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton on screen?
Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton.
Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton. Richard Burton.
Reviews, as you can imagine, were not kind. Multiple critics suggested the film would make a good drinking game. It was spectacularly bad, a turgid slog, and so terrible that you'll need to ice your face when it's over to ease the pain of wincing for 2 hours. Articles compiled the most scathing tweets from critics and celebs alike. Listicles cataloged the film's most unintentionally hilarious moments. As for Lohan specifically, she was woeful, too awful to watch. Many critics lamented the fact that she did not attempt to speak in Taylor's famously high-pitched voice, and almost universally echoed my take on her youthful inexperience. At the same time, you can really sense in many of these pieces, as you might in this video, the gnawing tension between wanting to accurately review a seriously bad film about a beloved icon and feeling cruel for piling on a young woman who really was not being supported in any way. Not by the script, not by the production team, not by the producers, and not by a culture that enjoys humiliation every now and again. Richard Lawson summarized it this way: I suppose it's a little cruel to harsh on this movie considering how badly Lohan needs and wants it to work, and that sure, plenty of kind and decent people were likely employed by the film. But it's such a lazy bit of shoddy craftsmanship, such a ham-handed attempt to sell Lohan exploiting junk as some kind of story about a classic breathtaking romance, that I think it earns our scorn. Thompson's gamble barely paid off. The film's premiere drew just 3.5 million viewers, far behind Lifetime's remake of Steel Magnolias that just a month earlier drew in 6.5 million viewers. The numbers were by no means bad, but given the amount of publicity the film received, it wasn't a massive success either. The film took another hit the following year when the BBC released its own biopic, Burton and Taylor, that was actually pretty good. The film focuses on the couple's final performances together in the play Private Lives in 1983, a framing that allows for much more specificity, a real portrait of a couple rather than a vague, broad overview of one. Helena Bonham Carter probably isn't the first actor you think of to play Elizabeth Taylor, but I think it mostly works. Her kooky energy fits 1980s Elizabeth well. You know, that big rolling laugh, you know? Anyway, it was just another occasion for Liz and Dick to catch strays. As David Bianculli wrote for NPR, Burton and Taylor is much more satisfying than watching a boring, by-the-numbers recreation of career highlights like last year's horrible Lifetime movie, Liz and Dick, starring Lindsay Lohan. So, did Liz and Dick accomplish what Lindsay Lohan hoped it would? Not really. Days after the film premiered on Lifetime, she was arrested again for allegedly hitting someone in a nightclub. Honestly, if I'd been reading all this shit about me, I'd be apt to hit someone too. The film obviously didn't help her professionally either. To be honest, I think we've only really seen Lindsay Lohan get a real career rebound in the last couple of years. Netflix makes the ugliest films I have ever seen in my life, but Lohan has been charming in the rom-coms she's made for them. Freakier Friday comes out this year, and so far everything surrounding that has looked promising. As for Thompson, well, he ran for Congress in Los Angeles, declaring, "This used to be Reagan country, and I'm running for Congress to take it back for him." Anyway, he lost 66% to 33%, so yeah, at least one good thing happened on November 5th, 2024. This whole situation not only underlines the horrid way we exploit celebrities, especially in their most difficult moments, but also, frankly, how difficult it is to create a succinct, effective biopic. This might be an unpopular opinion, but I'm not a huge fan of biopics that read like straightforward retellings of a person's life. I love it when there's a strange, surreal spin on things. Mishima, I'm Not There. Hell, even that episode of The Rehearsal where Nathan Fielder reimagines the life of Captain Sully. I've seen so many other creators make their arguments about biopics. Roy Deschanel tackled depictions of femininity in Priscilla, Thomas Flight asked why it's so hard to make a good musical biopic, and Mike the Snare made the case for the recent Robbie Williams movie, Better Man, being the best he's seen in years. I frankly had no interest in seeing that film until I watched this. This pop star I have no history with as a chimp was just honestly not an enticing prospect to me. But listen, if surreal is what you're looking for, I guess Ape Pop Star is not a bad place to start. You can watch Mike the Snare's video exclusively on Nebula right now. Nebula is an independent, creator-owned streaming platform specializing in thoughtful content. There are amazing perks to becoming a Nebula subscriber. Everything on Nebula is ad-free, and creators will often post exclusive content or give early access to their work. Sometimes that exclusive content will be one-off ideas that creators have been itching to make, but there are increasingly prestige projects streaming there that you literally can't watch anywhere else, and that really challenge creators like myself to push themselves to the next level creatively. PhilosophyTube made a literal movie. And look at the cast of Patrick Willems' upcoming Nebula short film, The Dinner Plan. Like, hello, that's huge. You can get all of that and everything else on Nebula for just $3 a month. That's a 40% discount when you sign up for an annual plan at go.nebula.tv/BeKindRewind. Once you've fallen in love with Nebula, you can pass on the good word by snagging some gift cards for your friends, or even sharing week-long guest passes so they can experience Nebula without having to input any credit card information. And if you're really loving your experience, you can get a lifetime subscription. Pay once and never think about it again. Log in and enjoy forever, no matter what. So go ahead and check out this QR code right here, or click the link in the description below to grab your discount, support the channel, and explore all of the amazing work these creators are doing. Watch the Better Man video now, Thomas Flight's, Roy Deschanel's, Patrick's. Give yourself a whole course on the biopic, ad-free, right now on Nebula.
Somebody actually really liked Lindsay Lohan's performance as Elizabeth Taylor on the Lifetime movie Liz and Dick. It's Lady Gaga. Now, Gaga's a friend of Lindsay's. She just sent out a brand new tweet praising Lohan for her performance. Let me read to you what she tweeted. She said, "Lindsay Lohan, you did a beautiful job on Liz and Dick. Let no one bring you down. Liz didn't. They always try to knock the greats down a few pegs."